All right. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to No Ordinary Life.
Hi.
Yes. So, today we have our special guest here, Maclean, and we're talking about demystifying entrepreneurship. We're going to be talking about the what to knows about entrepreneurship, the things that people don't usually know about, and the things that maybe entrepreneurs don't really, show you or inform you about. So it's the behind the scenes of entrepreneurship. So today we have our special guest, McLean. She will be introducing herself very shortly. But before we do that, I just want to introduce myself and No Ordinary Life. If it's your first time joining us. So, No Ordinary Life is a career motivation platform which seeks to encourage all people to pursue their passions, their goals, and their interests, and also to take meaningful routes to get there. So, we are very passionate about career development, skill development, purpose, and also mental health. And just to add to that as well, our theme for this year is how to get unstuck. So this entire year we're focusing on stuckness and how to get unstuck. So follow us for more content and more discussions on that on our social media platforms. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to our special guest who will introduce herself. And welcome if you just joined us. Please introduce yourself in the chat. Just say hi and maybe what country you're joining us from. We will be very grateful to hear. And so, yes, McLean, if you can tell us a little bit about yourself and even more on your ventures as well.
Thank you, Claudia. Um, I'm really excited to be here. Like you said, my name is Maclean Mbepula. I'm from Malawi, and I'm an entrepreneur. I I have several things that I do, and some of them. Okay, there's writing, there's business. I apart from entrepreneurship, also freelance. So I go across that. Um, and my background is in tech. My education is in both tech and education. So some of the things that I produce tend to be in those areas. But I decided to follow my passion. So I focus a lot on creativity and on the writing and performing because I'm also an artist. Yeah, I think that sums it up.
Hey, thank you very much for sharing. So McLean is what you describe as a serial entrepreneur. So maybe she can define what a serial entrepreneur is. But she has several ventures, and you will get to know more about them as we talk. So just as I guess as a little icebreaker. So this is a question we haven't prepared for.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Thank you.
That was an easy one. um, so, if you got the chance to have a dinner with, let's say, five people, okay, either dead or alive, who would they be and why?
Ooh, I like this question. And first, hey, hi, Christine Newton. Nice to have you. Okay, five people. I would love to have Dr. Gabor Mate. He's alive. I would love to have Trevor Noah. You said and why, but I'm just saying the names off the top of my head first. Sinbad, the comedian, as well. Who else? Nelson Mandela and Jesus. Jesus, I think it's obvious, you know? um, Trevor Noah, because I relate with how he thinks and some of the things that I read in his book, how he expresses himself. I like where he's at in his life, and I think it would be inspirational to hear, to learn from him. Sinbad, again, because I understand, I think I get how he thinks and the fact that he's a comedian and all that. And I'm in awe of him. I think I don't know if you know this, but I also do stand up comedy, so that's why I wanted these two there. Nelson Mandela, for obvious reasons, because of how he lived, the impact he made, the decisions he made that were just completely, you know, unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah.
who comes out of jail after 20 something odd years and says, we're going to do a forgiveness thing. We're not going to just jail everyone who did us wrong. It's profound. I
Mm.
can't even conceive of that.
Yeah.
And the last person, Dr. Gabor Mate, he's a doctor who's alive now. I'm going to talk about him at some point during the questions that you you prepared. But his work in the space of trauma and recovery and the wisdom that is passed on from generation to generation, and even within your own body, even before you are birthed, it's just it's beyond amazing.
Mm.
So these five people.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Some very interesting people. Did you mention why Jesus or
I didn't. I said. I mean, it's obvious. I mean, he's Jesus. I mean, come on. Like some of the things that he did, like walking on water, multiplying bread. Da, da, da. Some people say, okay, so I'm a Christian, but some people say that okay, it was just these were just stories, as in they weren't. They were supposed to be metaphorical. I think he actually did this stuff.
mm,
So I would like to sit down with him and just to learn to grasp. I mean, you know,
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, wonderful people. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so we'll get into our questions very shortly, but thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Christine, for joining. There's probably someone else that I don't know your name yet, but I'll find out soon. Thank you for joining. Please share the link on your WhatsApp, on your social media for people to join as well. It's a very exciting conversation. And so, um, for those of you who joined us, this is a very interactive session. So at some point, Maclean will be able to answer your questions as well. So just feel free to put them in the chat, and then at different points in the conversation, I will go around and take your questions. So share your questions when you're able to. Yes, so Maclean, very first question, a very obvious question. It seems like an easy question, but I think it's a good way to start this conversation off. So, who is an entrepreneur?
Okay. I guess an entrepreneur is someone who starts a business.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. And then, so in terms of entrepreneurship, business, what are the different types of entrepreneurships out there that people should be aware of?
I remember when we were prepping for this, I told you this is the one thing that I'm going to actually research, the one question. So, according to my research, there are four types of entrepreneurship. There's startup, there's small business, there's intra entrepreneur,
Mm,
and what is that? There's also social enterprise. So, okay, I think one of them is scalable startups, not just startups. So, entrepreneurship is the kind of business that is tailored around meeting a social responsibility or social need. You
mm,
see these especially in like microfinance, for example, or businesses that have a very giving back to the community type thing. You also see them in businesses that are environmentally focused. Anything can be a social enterprise if it is largely benefiting
yeah,
community or
yeah.
communities or the world. You also have scalable startups. For example, businesses like Dell. When I was reading, they were saying, businesses that could start in a garage or whatever and grow to be, huge in the city or the world. So a lot of tech businesses tend to be scalable startups. A lot of these apps and whatever, these ones that can be this small today, but with enough resources can grow.
Yeah.
Then you also have the small businesses where, for example, just a corner shop or a local business that it may have its limitations, and even the owners may wish for those businesses to stay small. Not everybody wants global domination. And then lastly, intrapreneurship, where an individual can work within a big business and operate as an entrepreneur within the business, meaning within themselves, they manage themselves as a business within. So the example I found online was like someone working at Google, for example. That individual could run themselves or operate or um, carry themselves as their own enterprise there, because they're given rooms to be, often they're given room to be creative, innovative, to solve problems in their own way, because essentially an entrepreneur is a problem solver for a fee, for a price, you know, with that component of risk taking and venturing forth. Yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that. So I guess in a way, I can identify No Ordinary Life as maybe being in the social enterprise aspect of things. And I hope if you're here and you have your own business or your own venture, you're able to establish where you stand in the different types of entrepreneurship. So yes, thank you for sharing that, Maclean, and thank you to those of us, those who've just joined us. Michael, thank you. Kojo, thank you. Christine, thank you. And I don't know who else, but there's another person who's not said hi yet, but they're there. So thank you very much for joining. And then in terms of, there's this term that people use, the other terms as well, freelance, serial entrepreneur, all of these terms that have a ner at the end, and even what you coined afropreneur, I think is, I'm not sure if you coined it actually, but I think it actually exists. If you can define them as well, that would be very helpful. Yes.
Okay, well, I think you can add Noor to almost anything, and then it's
Yeah.
gonna carry that essence that we're
Yes.
referring to. So, for example, I would often consider myself, primarily before, because my background is tech, I would call myself, or like my byline or whatever on LinkedIn or whatever, I would say tech entrepreneur, because I would focus on tech.
Mm,
I built a few solutions or other platforms that, on different content management systems or whatever, or I built websites for clients, handled their social media, whatever. Most of the things that I was doing were tech based
mm,
and for money. So I considered myself a tech entrepreneur. But there's an endless, or maybe not endless, but there's a variety of entrepreneur ventures that you can start and focus on. Um, I also, at some point, tried agribusiness. So I was an agri entrepreneur. I think that's the term. Um, Farming, sometimes buying the produce elsewhere, selling to a market for a fee. But you also mentioned freelancing, for example, that there's that difference. With freelancing, you are the business. And I think I love what Robert Kiyosaki wrote in his book. I'm not sure if it's in Rich Dad Poor Dad or a different publication of his, but he talks about there's a quadrant. There are four different types. There's freelancing, there's investor, there's business, and I think there's big business. So with freelancing, you're the business, meaning if you're sick, hey, you're not going to make money. Business, if you're sick, for example, the business will go on without you. Investor, it means perhaps you bought real estate somewhere, you bought stocks, you bought bonds somewhere. And even if you're sick, your investments are making money for you, passive income. You make dividends from it, or in the event that one day you want to sell it, you can make extra money from the hopefully the stocks, the bonds, whatever, have appreciated in value since you bought them. So you're going to make extra money from the new value of that.
mm,
Um, and then big business, obviously, it's like conglomerates. It's what do you call them? Licensing and franchises. Like you don't even have to start the business. You could just buy a license for McDonald's, set it up in your city, and you already have the formula. You already have all the procedures. They tell you everything. You don't have to think of anything new. You just follow the template, and that saves you a lot of I mean, they've spent millions of dollars perfecting their systems. So depending on how you're approaching it, there are different types of quadrants. And I hope I'm right that it was Robert Kiyosaki who said you should aim to be in the investor column and in the business column, because I mean the benefits outweigh. Because within the business aspect, you can have people who you employ or who you collaborate with who can help you achieve more. Essentially, it's you can achieve exponentially with others than with yourself as a freelancer. or as a consultant, because I think that's freelancer stroke consultant in some cases. Um, so there are different ways that one can approach working for yourself or being an entrepreneur. But essentially, what this talk was for was entrepreneurship. So it's the small business, the scalable startup. Um, it's the all the NORs, all the what is this solopreneur where there's just you, but you have a business running. And right now with technology, that is possible. You could start a publishing house from your home and write tons of books, or you can start a publishing house, engage writers who write for you, you edit, or you can engage editors, engage writers, set up a business that is handling all of these things, and you're just paying the writers and the editors. There's so many things. You could start a label, a clothing label online. You don't even have to have the things physically there. There are companies who sell the shirts and print them there and ship them for you. Amazon, eBay. There are endless ways to create enterprise in our era. Yeah.
On that, just talking about entrepreneurship, what are the benefits of entrepreneurship? You mentioned that it can be, solopreneur. I guess it can be lonely at the start because it's mostly starts from an idea, and it's usually one person. Sometimes there's two people. But what are the benefits of entrepreneurship?
Okay. So I think if we're looking at the original share that I gave you of the four types, then we're probably focusing on the um, scalable startup, um, and the benefits, right?
Yes.
The benefits. I think I think I'll focus on what I have experienced, because I'm sure there are some benefits that I haven't experienced yet. Um, I think number one, the flexibility, the
Mm,
freedom. I am extremely free. Like
mm,
I I structure my own time, which
yeah.
I love. I love that. I can start my day at 6 a.m., or I can start it at 10 p.m., or I can start it at 6 p.m. It's entirely up to me. I can work a 4 day week or whatever. There's that freedom, and I love it. I love that freedom. Uh, Two,
Mm,
and it's not just about the time, by the way. Um, you get to choose also what you invest in. You get to choose who you work with.
yeah.
You also get to choose who you work for, which I believe are just extremely powerful. I think it can be really challenging to be in an environment where you're not really wanting to be there, but you have to. And when you go there, you are in an environment or in a collective that is difficult for you or whatever. So um, being able to have that, to be able to call the shots for yourself, I think is a huge advantage. And then number three, um, you get to choose. Um, you can choose to focus. You get to choose what you focus on. Um, you can chase, or you can follow, or you can create your life around whatever it is that you're passionate about. If you decide to choose passion, you know, because you can be an entrepreneur and what you're doing isn't something you're passionate about, and that's fine, because if you're making money, you can have enough money to follow your passion on the side. But yeah, I think these are some of the advantages of entrepreneurship. There are probably a lot more, but I really value the freedom.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, I've had you on this platform before, and we talked about your experiences in terms of how you became an entrepreneur. And you mentioned that it was kind of a natural thing for you. You didn't actually think about working for anyone. So, I guess in that sense, um, when we talk about careers, and we talk about maybe the African context, there are certain careers that are kind of, seen as the model career, the doctor, the lawyer, the teacher, whatnot. But what would you say is the perception of being a business person? Um, in our context for someone who's, who is still living with parents, and if they said, I wanted to be an entrepreneur, what would you think their reaction will be, and what was your family's reaction to that?
Oh, well, I really like your question, but I just want to add something though. I may have not been clear last time.
Yeah.
Um, like I have worked for two different companies, or maybe, yeah, two different companies here in my country. Each of them about 6 months. And at the time, I would say, when I was signing contracts, I was like, I'll work part time. I insisted because I didn't want to quit my business during those times. And both times when I said yes to these opportunities, it was times when it was really hard being an entrepreneur and I just needed to make money,
Mm,
and I mean, if my business is not making money, what's the point? You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
But the fact that I love that freedom, I still wanted to hold on to the identity of entrepreneurship.
Mm,
I was glad when I left each of them. I was super. In fact, when I went to the second of those, that actually paid quite well. When I was quitting, all my friends thought I was insane, obviously. And then when I accepted it, actually, let me go backwards. When I accepted that, I actually cried, which is not a normal response to getting a decent paying job. It's just not a normal response.
mm,
So for me, because my father is was a civil servant, so his whole thing about being an adult is that you become an employee somewhere,
mm,
preferably civil service. My mom was and is an entrepreneur. Um, I would put her more into the freelancing category than anything else.
mm,
And I have seen her have like work really hard, like work until 2 a.m. or 3 a.m. I've seen her, you know, make really difficult decisions. I've seen her be creative. So I think for me, I had this model that was my mom.
mm,
However, it had always been hard for her from what I had seen. So I was aware that it wasn't easy going in. I just didn't know it from a first-hand experience. So when I made this choice, I think my mom, it was easy for her to understand because that's what she did. My dad, he never understood the whole idea. He never. It took him several years. I remember, I think around 2012, I think some newspaper wrote an article about some of the work I was doing, and it was in the news. And I had already been an entrepreneur since 2007. My dad saw the thing in the papers and was like, congratulations. Because for him, it was now legitimate because somehow it was in the news.
mm,
Whereas for me, I've been doing it since 2007. It wasn't, you know what I mean? Like it was real for me
mm,
since then. But for him, the whole concept of what is real or what was valid wasn't based on the same matrix I was using.
mm,
So there's that acceptance that we're seeing this from totally different perspectives. He did not have that whole concept where he was growing up, it wasn't there. So I can understand it. There was no framework for him. Yeah.
mm. Okay, so yeah, that's a very interesting story.
And
So
it was
between
challenging. Yeah.
very challenging, yeah, I can understand that. I can understand that. So I'll take a question from the audience. Welcome everybody. So Maximo says, let me put the question on here. He says, what's the one thing people fail to understand about being an entrepreneur, or the biggest misconception in your view?
Oh, I love this. Thank you, Maximo. Oh my gosh. All right. I off the top of my head, because if I had had this question hours ago or days ago, I think I'd give you a better response. So forgive me if it's not a good enough answer. But off the top of my head, I think the biggest misconception is that in Africa, okay, I'm going to specify Africa. I'm not sure about the rest of the world, but in Africa or in the African community, maybe abroad, it might still stand for you. The biggest misconception I know of is that being an entrepreneur is something you do when you can't get a job. That's the biggest misconception I've seen in my country, and I think in our African communities. It's in fact, if I say I've had this in the past, this would happen a lot way back. I'll tell people what I'm doing, and then their response might be, "Oh, that's okay." The vernacular for that is, "Oh, mola," that in English is that's it's like saying that's better, as in better than nothing. As in the kind of statement you'd say to someone who doesn't have a job and they're just, they're trying to not do illegal things or corrupt things. So it's better for them to sell tomatoes on the side of the road because it's better than stealing or whatever. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. So for me, that's the biggest misconception, being perceived as though you're an entrepreneur because you cannot get a professional, an office job somewhere by someone or some big corporation. Like you're unemployable or something.
For sharing that, and thank you for the question, Maximo. And I, this is a good follow-up question. What, apart from your own experience and maybe from other what you've seen in terms of people around you, what do you think also influences people's decision to go into entrepreneurship?
Right. I think there are so many reasons that can cause us, someone to choose entrepreneurship, and I think some of them are really deep reasons, like reasons that can even go. It can be extremely subconscious to us. Like upon reflecting on this question when you sent it, I realized that for me, I have some serious subconscious reasons why I prefer entrepreneurship. I think, and I'm just being very vulnerable here, I think I don't like being controlled. And I think being someone's employee, there is so much control that someone will have over you. I mentioned freedom being one of the biggest advantages that I see. And I think that ties into the fact that I don't want someone telling me how much I can earn in a month. I don't want someone telling me that I have to be somewhere from from something AM to something PM. I don't want to be told when I can take a holiday. I don't want to be told, there's just a lot that of control that an employer may have um, in the traditional sense. I mean, not all, but they have to be there obviously for businesses to exist. But I'm not the kind of personality that works well with stringent control. So there are different reasons. But for a lot of us, aside from that, so that could be like an ego reason. Let's be honest, that's an ego reason. Apart from that, there's the necessity of it. You know, if I don't like being employed, but I need money, and we live in a capitalist society, I I need to start a business. I don't see what other alternative there is. Um, yeah, so necessity I think is there for a lot of us, and then also there's the issue of you may see something that needs to exist according to you. There's a problem, someone needs to solve it, but it is not financially sustainable for you to do it for free. Therefore a financial aspect needs to be tied into it so that you can make it sustainable, so that you can solve that problem. So, and we have a world that has a lot of problems, a lot of problems. So it's either you start an NGO to solve that problem, or you start a business to solve that problem.
Thank you very much for sharing. So we have some comments here as well in the chat. I'll take a few of them. Someone says the misconception is very true. Yep. And there's also a follow-up question. Oh, Walter says, is the freedom for you? Yeah, he likes the fact that there's freedom. Even when you mention about the fact that you can take holidays when you want to and the amount of pay you can get, that's very, very true. It's all freedom, I suppose. And then I have a question here from Walter. He says, as an entrepreneur, is it all about the profit?
Um,
Yes.
Thanks, Walter, for that question. No, it's not. And I think it goes back to the structure of business that you, maybe not the structure, but the ideology of business that you choose. If you were to choose to be a social entrepreneur, or you to start a social enterprise, then the concept of the impact that that business will have on your community or in the world is what is more important than profit. But the issue of sustainability comes into play. And that means you have to tie in money because of capitalism. We have no choice. Some of us are unwilling participants in capitalism. I mean, how do we pay rent? How do we, you don't, because the thing is, I think there's also a subset of people who start enterprises because they don't like the idea of, they would otherwise start an NGO, but the idea of always having to go to someone or to some organization to keep sustaining it is debilitating, or it's kind of, you know, and people can do that. There's a personality, or there are groups of people who can do that, but some people prefer that, you know, not having to lean so heavily on, you know, that in that kind of way. So sometimes it's the social aspect. It's not just about profit.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, so social aspect is very important. Good. Thank you. There's another question from Maximo. So he's talking about in reference to your. Okay, let's read that out. He says in reference to what you said about your dad being a civil servant, what is your view of socialists that say capitalism is ruining the world? As an entrepreneur, what's your opinion on those attacks?
I'm not sure. Okay, this is a I this question may be too clever for me. Because I'm kind of laughing because I had this conversation with a friend recently where we were talking about capitalism, socialism, and communism. We didn't get too far into it because I told him that the one I really know most is capitalism, and I'm not the biggest fan of capitalism. But your question says, what's your opinion on those attacks? I don't think these are attacks. I think there's opportunity to discuss things, because what we this okay, I feel like sometimes we need to sit and look at where we're at and see, is it working? The question is capitalism working? Is it working? Is it working? I mean, if I look at my country and I look at the fact that we have been a poor country for decades now, the question is it working? You know, and it's frustrating. And I say this as a person who is actively engaged in capitalism. It's just, so basically, I'm asking a question back. Is what we're doing right now working? And if it's not working, is there opportunity to try something else? And if there is opportunity to try something else, are there other alternatives that are there viable? You know, the problem is we're so in love with the concept of capitalism that it can be difficult to look at other options. Now, I'm not saying I'm a communist or socialist or whatever. I don't even actually understand what socialism is.
Mm.
Not really. But if there was something that I would be behind is egalitarianism. I don't know if that's even a structure of this nature, whereby I think I have a very hippie perspective about trade, but it may not even be realistic or practical. So mine is very open-minded. My opinion about your question is very open-minded. Is what we're doing working? Are there alternatives that we could think about?
Mm. Oh, interesting, interesting. The discussion for another time is, and it's a, I guess it's a debate question in most cases, but there's no answer to that at the moment, and who knows. There's more questions, and I'll come to them very shortly. Um, for those of you who just joined us, I'm taking questions as we go along. And then at some point, we will take, there's going to be a special, I'd say, performance from Maclean. As you know, if you're following us on social media, this week is Mental Health Awareness Week. And so the theme for this year is to help with my anxiety. So Maclean, being a poet, is going to recite a poem which she wrote at some point. So stick around and don't leave yet. All right. So back to the questions. So I have a question here regarding this one here. Okay. Um, do you think that entrepreneurship is a calling? Do you think that there
Um,
are people who are born into this world to be, entrepreneurs?
I think for some people, yes, definitely, definitely. And if you would allow me to share with you a quote from Dr. Gabor Mate that actually speaks to that. I mentioned him as one of the five people that I would love to meet. You asked me why, I gave you my reason. But there was an interview that he did for this Diary of a CEO fairly recently. And not only is he a doctor, but he's also an author. He wrote a book recently called The Myth of Normal, and he mentioned how he also had challenges writing. As you know, I write, um, and I really liked what he said um, about the concept of creativity and writing as a calling. And within it, he actually said that it's essentially expressing creativity, whatever we do. When we are, if someone chooses to be an entrepreneur, they're trying to solve a problem. The very act of creating a business is creative. In the interview, he actually said that we are most like God. And forgive me if you're not religious, whatever your beliefs are, we are most like whoever made us or whatever made us when we are creating. We are basically mimicking him or it or however you want to say it. And it is part of our innate nature to do so, to create. We have to, it's not even a thing of choice, it's a thing that we must do. And that depends entirely on you, what it is that you create, whether it is a book, a product, a solution to a world problem, the next app. You have to do it. You feel it viscerally. It's a part, it's a passion almost. So if someone a person who is called to be an entrepreneur, I believe, is someone who is passionate about entrepreneurship. Doesn't necessarily mean that they're a serial entrepreneur, but they are passionate about the enterprise that they're birthing forth, the product or the service that they are bringing to the world.
Mm.
That's the way I see it. And I was looking for the actual uh, article. Can I quickly read that a little
Yes.
bit? An excerpt. Okay. So this is what Dr. Gabor Mate said about books, but you can put product or business there. So he said, but creativity doesn't have to take the form of formal art, but it does have to take some flow of something that's inside you that needs to come out. You get hopelessly hemmed in by frustration if you don't. And so, in that sense, everybody has got that creative urge, and that may take the form of social intercourse. It might take the form of gardening. I don't care, communing with nature, athletic expression. I don't care. But what everybody uh, has got it. And if people don't realize they have it, it's only because life has hemmed them in. And sometimes it's because they're too busy living or trying to make a living or trying to survive or too disconnected from themselves. But it is in all of us, and to the extent that we don't give it expression, we suffer. So the person who is called to be an entrepreneur, from what Dr. Gabor Mate shared, is someone who has to be an entrepreneur, has to be. Like, they suffer if they are not. And I'm not talking about suffering from a lack of finance, suffering from a lack of being in enterprise, if that makes sense.
Okay. So a follow-up question with that is, do you think that people who are called to be entrepreneurs, do you think that they find, because of, the fact that they're called, do you think that they will find it easier to do entrepreneurship because of that calling, or would you say it's the same struggle as everyone? It's just maybe their passion for it that drives them.
I honestly don't know. I don't know. I think though that there are certain talents, there are certain things that could make it easier for one person to be an entrepreneur than someone else. But there are also a lot of variables that are outside our our control. For example, there's some people who are naturally good salespeople, for example, and the
Mm,
sales is a very strong component of enterprise. You have to sell. I mean, that's it boils down to selling. There's some people who can sell a product that doesn't exist yet or a service that doesn't exist yet,
mm,
and they're making money even before the thing exists. So if a person, for example, so I would say there's certain skills that can definitely make it easier for someone to be an entrepreneur. Certain skills like sales,
Mm.
Maybe creating a process that gets your product or service out there faster, or like leadership, where even if you're not the one doing or doing creating the product or offering the service, but you have other people working for you, you're such a great leader that you know how to identify the best talent to work with. You're such a great leader that you know how to keep the great talent, even if maybe money isn't exactly on your side as a business yet. So I believe there are certain skills that some people can naturally have. But at the same time, there is room for us to become better. You can be an okay salesperson and invest in yourself and become a great salesperson. You can be an okay leader, invest in yourself and become a better leader. You can be an okay, manager or whatever, invest in yourself, become a better manager. And then there's some things that you just know you suck, and it's better you delegate to someone who is better at those things. But this question really reminds me of the concept, that the Japanese concept called, I think it's called I, ikagia. I don't know if you've heard of this. I, ikagia, I think. There are four things that you need to ask yourself. Um, ikiagi, sorry. I think it's called ikiagi. Ikigai. The four things that you need to ask yourself when you become entrepreneur, or when you're thinking of being an entrepreneur: what do you love? What are you good at? What the world needs, and what you can be paid for. So talent, love, pay, need. You want to be involved in a business where your talents shine. You want to be involved in a business that you love or are passionate about. You want to be fulfilling a need, and you want to make sure that you can get paid for it. So when you find something that can intersect with all four of these, then you're it's likely, or the odds are in your favor. But certainly there are some skills that can make it easier for some people to do enterprise.
Thank you very much. I love that last quote that you mentioned. So it's by, if you, I'm sure you'll share it after, and we'll put it in the description for people to check out as a resource as well. A question, I'll go with this question first. So someone says, what is your opinion on partnership?
I think it's fantastic. Honestly, I really, really do. Um, but at the same time, you have to be very careful when you are choosing it. It's not ideal for some, in some cases. Like partnership really depends on who you're working with, and also on yourself. So it requires a certain level of intelligence on both parts and certain skills. If you find that you work better in a team structure, a partnership is a good idea. If you find that you work better calling the shots, then you may struggle with partnership. But I think partnership is the ideal, honestly, because we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses. And when you have a partnership where the person has your strengths, rather has strengths in the what you are weak, you're making a wonderful combination if you can work together, if you can synergize. So for example, I am very creative, and I enjoy people. I enjoy people that I enjoy, not just holistically, but I enjoy people that I enjoy. So I would work. I would prefer a partnership with someone who's better in what I'm weaker at, which would be like the accounting, the legal stuff, the paperwork. I would be happy to form partnerships. I would be happy to create new products, to do design related things, um, things like that, to strategize, those type of things, to ideate, to work with employees, partners, whatever. But I would need someone who has a solid head on their shoulders to deal with the money, to deal with the law things, to deal with all that stuff. So I think a partnership is a fantastic idea if you can find someone that complements you and that you can complement. It is a bad idea if you find someone who is not a good fit in that regard. Really bad, because you could end up like if I found someone just like me, we'll have the same strengths and we'll have the same weaknesses, which means there's that whole area that's left unattended, you know. So it really depends on who is partnering, you and the other person.
For sharing that. Okay. So we've mentioned the challenge, the benefits of being an entrepreneur. I think we'll come to the challenges. But I think I'll take a few more questions, or contributions actually. Um, okay, there's a question here. I'll go for a contribution first to give you a rest. Okay. So Maximo said smart people get smarter uh, to work with them. Reference to the if you get stuck. Get other people to do the things you're not good at. Yeah, rightly said. And then um I think there's another question here which I think you've already referred to. Maximo also says, can you learn to be an entrepreneur?
Yeah.
Simple question. Yes, you can. Yeah, like I guess for you, your point of reference was your mother, then, to how you learned to be an entrepreneur. Maclean. Oh, okay. Maclean, I think frozen. Oh dear. Okay. Hello. Oh, I think we've lost McLean. Hopefully, she should be back soon. Okay, she should be back soon. Her internet connection is pretty. Her internet signal is pretty low, so she should be back soon. Okay. In the meantime, thank you all for sticking around. Um. Oh, yeah, she has. She had to leave. Yeah, she'll come back again. There we go. Ah,
Sorry, I'm so sorry. I think so, it must have been a problem on my end, I think.
yes. No
Uh,
worries.
what was the question again?
Maximo said, "Can you learn to be an entrepreneur?"
Yes, definitely. It's all, I think to a large extent, it boils down to skills, the skills that we are willing to acquire. Um, there is a lot of learning that happens regardless of the field that you choose. There are some fields that require a lot more learning than others. I mean, for example, if you are in tech, certain branches of tech, there is constant innovation, which means you have to keep learning. And some other areas is quite static. You know, there's not much change that happens in them. Some field or some types of entrepreneurship or types of businesses. So it really depends on whether you're a good learner, I think, and your capacity for risk, because that's the one of the components of entrepreneurship. It's if you're taking a risk, you have literally you can do as much research as you want. You can, there is always going to be that component of risk. So your capacity of risk, you have to assess if you can handle that risk. Um, and also, I think you have to understand yourself as well. You really need to understand yourself. I do have something I wanted to share, but I don't know if we even got to that question or whether it's where I wanted to put it. Um,
Yeah.
can I? Yeah. Uh,
Yes. Go for it.
perhaps
Yeah.
it. Okay. So perhaps it ties into what Maximo asked about can you learn to be an entrepreneur? As I said, yes, you can, but also it requires that you know yourself or are on the path to know yourself somehow. Because apart from the product that you're going to make or the service that you're going to offer, you really do need to spend some time figuring yourself out because you are your biggest uh, investment, your biggest tool, your biggest resource outside of the partners that you might have or the external resources that you might have. You have to manage yourself. You're the engine. You know what I mean? You're the so you need to know yourself. In fact, you need to SWOT yourself. You need to know your strengths, weaknesses, your opportunities, your threats. You need to know yourself. And I think I mentioned this last time when you interviewed me, or I mentioned it somewhere, but I personally, I love psychology. And I would really recommend anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur to spend some time. I think it's in my book, Challenge Accepted. Spend some time getting to know yourself, which means know, not just know your personality. There's the stuff we know surface level wise, but I love to take tests, and that's what helps me. Apart from introspecting and trying to figure myself out, like why did I feel that? Why did I think that? Why did I do that? I also like to take tests to know myself at a different level. So I take personality tests, I take intelligence tests, I take relationship tests, like I have taken a lot of tests. And for someone like me, like I know my insecurities, I know the things that are difficult for me. I know sometimes that I can have self doubts, and when I go back to the results in some of these tests, I can say, wait, this isn't true. This is what the test says, and I remember I took it honestly. So this is what I know about myself. And as an entrepreneur, I can go back to that. For example, I know that I am highly agreeable, for example, and that's problematic. It sounds like a good thing, but it's problematic because I remember telling you before we got on this that I wish I could share this my screen, etc. I would have shown you my results on one of the tests that have been taken since 2015. I've taken it 12 times since 2015 to present 2023, and consistently out of 0 to 5, something like 0 to 100%, I score at the very top, like 95 to 100% in terms of agreeableness over that period of time. And um, on a surface level, that looks good, but for managerial reasons, if you, especially if you have employees, or if you have, you're working with certain clients or interacting with people, sometimes that can be a bad thing because one, you may be taken advantage of. I found it when I had employees, I found it really hard to fire underemploying entrepreneurs. I felt bad for firing them, yet I was losing money, literally hemorrhaging money. And at the end of it, I end up, dealing with debt because I had taken a loan to get started at that point, and I had to spend something like 5 years trying to pay that off. Had I fired those underemploying, under performing employees early enough, I could have saved myself some of the debt. So the fact that I know this allows me to choose very wisely the relationships I get involved with. There's like I know I'm a pushover for certain types of personalities, so I actually kind of try and keep some distance with some people that I know. Ooh, oh, this is a very strong personality for me, and I will be sucked in, and I will find it really hard to say no or to. So I know, so I can adjust myself. So I suggest strongly anyone who wants to be an entrepreneur, get to know yourself, your personality, your types. Like I know the types of intelligence that I am strong in. There are types of intelligence. Psychologists say there's no one type of intelligence. There are different types: musical, linguistic, intrapersonal intelligence, interpersonal intelligence, and all sorts. And for example, in my case, my strongest is intrapersonal intelligence, followed by interpersonal, which means I'm self-smart. Like that's my most potent intelligence, followed by inter. I can understand other people's feelings and all that. So I'd really suggest take the tests that you can, but make sure that if you take the test, you are honest with yourself. Because if you take them and you lie to yourself, you're going to get results that are not true. And secondly, take them at a time when you're not in crisis, like you're at your baseline. Because if you take the tests when you're like in crisis, you're going to get results that aren't true. Or you take them when you're super, you're at a high, things are fantastic, you're going to get skewed results. You want them at a time where you just, your level, and then you can
Level
know, okay,
balanced.
yeah. So yeah.
Thank you very much for sharing that. That was very, very, very good. And that's basically know yourself as an entrepreneur, and even I just generally everyone needs to know themselves, because in the world of work and interacting with people, you need to know what you can handle and what you can't handle.
Mm-hmm.
So that's very important. Thank you for sharing that. I'll take another question. This is from Walter. And he says, how do you manage friends and family and friends as an entrepreneur? If all the time that you have or less time that you have.
Okay. You know what? Okay, so I'm gonna answer this question, but I'm also gonna kind of add on to what I just answered because I wrote some notes and I realized that I didn't give you all of the things that I wrote. And
Yeah, sure.
it ties into your question, Walter. Apart from knowing yourself, well, within knowing yourself, you have to also know your values. Because you're a human being, you also have to know your motivators and your triggers. Um, so by that and your needs also. So you know yourself, your values, your virtues, your triggers, your needs. You need to know these. So even in terms of managing your time with your family and your friends, managing your business, if you convey this, you need to communicate this with the people that you love, the people in your life. You need to convey what your values are. If your business is important to you, you need to convey those. And if your friends and family have been communicated well in regards as to what is important to you, it's on them to also try and accommodate these things, you know. And it's also on you. It's also on you to say, I have to make time for friends. I have to make time for family. Like in the past, when I was much younger, I would really spend a lot of time on my business and like neglect time with my friends and my family. But based on the personality that I have, the person that I am, social interaction is very, very important. And not just social interaction, but quality social interaction. So it's important that I spend time with certain family, certain friends, for even my own health and also for them as well. Um, but I think what it boils down to in terms of managing that with friends and family is communication. And I think when it comes to communication, and I could be wrong, but this is from my experience, I feel like us females, and as I said, I could be wrong, but I feel like us females are, it's easier for us to communicate than males. I have had uh, male friends who won't communicate, and you know when you later on are, you know, like irritated and about the issue, they would say, okay, this is what happened, A, B, and C, D, and you're like, well, if you said that, I would have understood, you know. But because there was that blackout of information, it's hard for you to know um, what that person is doing. You know what I mean? It's easy for you to feel neglected or whatever if there is no communication. So it needs to be clear, and even boundaries or opportunities, or you know, for example, if family, if someone that you love finds quality time important, then you need to create time for them so that you meet their need. If and this goes back to what I mentioned about knowing yourself. You also have to know those people in that case. What is important to this person that I love? If what is important to them is words of affirmation and quality time isn't a big thing, then you have to make sure you're on WhatsApp saying, "Hey, baby, I love you." You know, more than you know, meeting them or whatever. So you need to know what your friends and family needs, see what you can manage, and communicate when you're not able to meet those needs. And likewise, you need to ask the same from them. And at the bottom line of all of this is that need for communication. Like for myself, my closest friends have told me what their love languages are. If you don't know what this is it's how you perceive being loved, you know.
Mm.
There's a whole thing about it. 5lovelanguages.com has all that information. But if you want your people, the people that you care about, to feel loved, you would figure out what you can ask them to tell you what their love languages are, and you can try and meet them at that, you know. So I have one friend, quality time is important to her. I have another friend, you know, like words of affirmation are important to her. She needs to be told that she is beautiful, or she is, you know, valued, or you know, she whatever. I give them to her authentically. What I know it to be true, she gets that. You know, if for example my mom likes quality time, I would have to go visit her. I'm not very good at that, but she's complained about that. So that's something that I sometimes think about. You know, things like that. communication is so important.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Thank you very much for sharing that. There's a whole conversation going on in the comment section about family and friends and the lines between, you know, where you draw the lines and whatnot. But I was gonna we've hit the 1 hour mark, so I wanted to ask my final question, and I think it's related to challenges. I would say for, as an entrepreneur, um, what are the biggest disappointments that you you've kind of I would say experienced as an entrepreneur generally? It might be very personal, but you can just kind of be very vague about it, and I'll chip in as well.
The biggest challenges, is that what you said?
Yeah, challenges and maybe disappointments as well.
Okay, I
Yeah.
think it boils down to myself. I think.
Mm.
I think that's my biggest my biggest disappointment is myself.
Oh,
But honestly,
okay.
yeah. I think I think, but also I am I am I'm learning self compassion. I've had very high expectations for myself, and I have had incredibly high goals, like unbelievably high. Like I can't even talk about it, high level goals,
Mm.
and I haven't hit a lot of those. And I think that's been one of my main challenges, and I think that's why I've come down to the whole knowing myself thing. Because first of all, some of the goals I was setting or whatever were things that I hadn't set in light of who I am or who I was at the time. So I was asking of myself things I would not be able to deliver, and that is unfair. So hence the whole compassion aspect. Um, yeah, the whole knowing, and then that also means setting expectations that would be fair from that vantage point. Um, so that, yeah, the accountability aspect. um, I feel I have failed myself to some extent, but at the same time, there's also that thing that you have to disconnect yourself. And this is the other thing that Dr. Gabor Mate said in the interview with the Diary of a CEO, where he said you have to disidentify yourself from your product and your service. You have to disidentify yourself, you as a person, as an entrepreneur, from the thing that you're offering the world. You have got to separate those two because you're separate. You are not your business. You are not your product. You are you. You are Claudia, or you are Maclean, or you are Walter, or you are Maximo. You are Maximo, and this is the product. This is the service. This is the solution you're giving. Two separate things. You have to find that difference, because if you say I am an entrepreneur and my business failed, therefore I am a failure, you cannot afford that mindset. It is not a healthy
Mm.
mindset. You can acknowledge that the business failed. You can acknowledge that you made mistakes. You can acknowledge that you could have done better. You could have acknowledged that this challenge, was bigger than you anticipated. You can acknowledge all of those things, but you are not your business. You are not your product. You're two separate entities. And when you put your product out in the world, in fact, you can do all the research in the world, do all the hard work, and your business or your product can still fail. And you're not the failure, okay? And you are not a failure. It's just two separate things. And how it is received by the world, as much as we will audit and try and improve and post mortem a thing, they're two separate things. So I think, as I have answered you, my biggest challenge was in getting into this without knowing myself fully. Um, but that is now my biggest strength now. I am at a place where I know myself extremely well, and I can be compassionate as I go for what I'm going for. Yeah.
Okay, wow. Thank you for sharing that. So that was a final question from me. And I'm gonna do something very different here. We didn't plan for this, but I wanted to show everyone. So I'm gonna turn my video off for a few seconds while I do this. So for those of you who are, I'll keep Maclean on. I'll use this one instead. So I'm gonna share my screen. Maclean has written a book, a very great book. I'm currently reading it at this time. It's called Challenge Accepted, and it's all about the grassroots perspective of entrepreneurship in Africa. So, Maclean, if you can tell us a little bit about it before we do the last bit of our talk today. Let me go back on. Okay, so do you want to talk a little bit about the book? Just kind of briefly summarize it.
Right. Thanks, Claudia. I wish you told me this in advance because I haven't read my book in some years now. Anyway, it's a book on entrepreneurship from the perspective of an entrepreneur in the grassroots. I am an entrepreneur in the grassroots, so I'm not speaking from a vantage point that a lot of books come from. I'm speaking as a person in the trenches, from my experiences in the trenches, still in the trenches. Um, and I think the experiences here that I've had in Malawi are experiences that a lot of our other entrepreneurs can resonate with across the continent and various parts of the world and different communities. So, from different challenges with dealing with people, managing yourself, choosing a business, there's just a lot of things in there. And opportunities, I believe there's a chapter in terms of business opportunities one may look at, like energy is an area. Like when I say energy, I mean solar, renewable energy. I think I mentioned something in there. Agribusiness, all these other things are in there. So yeah, it's a book on entrepreneurship from the vantage point of an entrepreneur in the grassroots.
Thank you for sharing that, Maclean. And I will give my honest review about it when I'm finished with the book, or even before I finish, because I have been reading the book and I found it very difficult to put the book down. Like I'm not a big reader, but any spare time I have, I'm actually reading the book. So
Wow.
it's a very good book. Yeah,
Thanks.
it gives you the basics of how to start a business. How to use social media to market your business. Everything is in there. So if you're someone who wants to start a business or just start something, do get the book, and maybe I might give away a free copy. I might give away. We'll see. So we might have time for one more question, but before we do that final question, I wanted to ask Maclean if she could share with us something that she's prepared. So if you were not with us in the beginning, this week, the 15th to the 21st of May, is Mental Health Awareness Week in the UK. And it's focused, this year's theme is to help with my anxiety. So basically all over our social media for this whole week, we're asking people what they do to help them to cope when they feel anxious, or when they have anxiety, basically. And Maclean is a writer, and so she's going to share with us a creative piece that she's written, and yeah, we're very excited to hear what she has to share. So I'm going to take myself off the screen and leave it to you, Maclean, whenever you're ready, Maclean.
Okay, thanks, Claudia. I'm going to share with you a short poem I wrote. It's in a book that is also on Amazon that I wrote called Flatline Deep. It's a poetry collection. So this poem that's in there is called Soothe. Is there a word that can be said to soothe you? A word to make everything okay? Is there a word that will fix you and fix this? The nights are hard, but not as much as the days and their decade-long seconds and centuries-long hours. You must be soothed. Your soul must be lathered with an elixir that heals it. A voice must be spoken and felt that lullabies you to a calm of safety that you no longer know. Your heart must be placed gently in a bowl of chicken soup and left to soak up its every comfort. You must be spoken to with words dipped in cinnamon and honey 10 times over. You must be held for hours on end. You must be acknowledged as real, potently real, and dangerously alive. You must be soothed. You really, really must. Thank you.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Maclean. That was beautiful.
Thank
That
you.
was I wish we could actually read it again, but we don't have much time. So that was a poem called Soothe.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if people wanted to actually read more of your poems or your short stories, how can they access those?
Okay, so I write on Medium. So my Medium link is macleanbepula.medium.com, I think. And I'm also, like I said, like you said, my book Challenge Accepted is on Amazon. But I also have two poetry collections. One is on love, and that one
Mhm.
is what is that one called? Oh my gosh, I forgot what my book is called. The other one, the one I just mentioned, is called Flatline Beep, and that one has a lot of types of categories of poems. Like I'm literally googling myself to find out what I named my other book. Oh my gosh. Anyway, I published three books in 2019. Claudia, I'm sure you can find it online. Um,
Yeah, we'll find it.
okay,
Okay, fantastic. So I'll put the link in for McLean on. I hope this is the right spelling. Is this the right spelling?
uh, yes, that is correct. That is correct.
Okay, fantastic. So you can view some more of.
Oh, wait, Claudia. Right. So
So
soothed is in beady eyed and mystified. And flatline beat is the one, the love one, the love collection. Yeah.
okay, wow. Thank you very much for sharing that. We will maybe we'll put a link to actually when we do just kind of put this on YouTube. We'll put the links to your Medium as well on there. Yeah, so thank you very much, everyone, for joining. We have one thing. Yeah, someone says beautiful, and I definitely agree with that. Thank you very much. We have one final question, and since this this talk is all about demystifying entrepreneurship, my question to you is what is some maybe let's say three things that you wish you knew before you entered into entrepreneurship, and what advice would you give to anyone who is considering being an entrepreneur or is actually already in the field?
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. So what did you wish you knew, three things that you wish you knew before you joined the field of entrepreneurship, and what advice would you give to someone who is currently pursuing entrepreneurship that you haven't mentioned before?
Okay. Okay, so that's a two-part question. What do I wish I knew? And what was the second part?
And an advice for an advice for a young person, let's say a young person, let's make a young person.
Okay. Well, I wish I knew. Okay, like I said, I wish I knew myself. I wish I knew other people. Okay, so when you're beginning a business, I think the temptation is to expect that your circle, your family, your friends are going to be your advocates for your products or your marketing people. You also kind of expect them to buy stuff, you know. And uh, honestly, if you haven't started a business, remove that mindset. Or if you have, just remove it. Anything that comes from family or friends, consider it a bonus because you're going to have a hard time if that's your focus. Honestly, you are going to have a hard time. You are going to strain that relationship. It's not going to be good for you. If anything comes from family or friends, celebrate it, thank God. But honestly, don't rely on that. It's going to break your heart because sometimes things will come through, sometimes it won't, and then you're just going to be bitter. And I had a lot of bitterness at the very beginning, but I'm glad I reached a point where I don't expect anything from my friends or my family regarding the work I put out. I don't expect them to read it. I don't expect them to buy my stuff. If they do, it melts my heart. I'm happy. I'm grateful to God that they did. But they're not my goal. My goal is whoever, I have friends who don't like poetry. They'll never buy my poetry book, but they will send a link to someone who might. And I appreciate that. So they don't have to. Don't put that pressure on anyone. Like I personally, I wouldn't want to have a friend who keeps writing stuff and I have to read everything. It's unfair. So I wish I knew that I should not rely so heavily on the people around me. It's unfair. It's too much pressure for them. And two, like I said, I wish I knew myself. my programming. That's the other thing I didn't mention, but we have a lot of programming, subconscious level programming, that as you go along, you discover the way you relate with people, the way you relate with yourself, the way you put out your product or service. I wish I knew that programming before. I'm learning it now, and I've spent time from 2016. I think I had some sort of an awakening in 2016, and I'm walking through that to present, where I'm trying to deprogram myself from some of the scripts that don't serve me as a person, as an entrepreneur, on whatever journey that I am on. So that I wish I knew that I had programming that didn't serve me, and I wish I knew how to change that programming as well. So I would suggest to entrepreneurs, and it goes back to it. It's not just your values or whatever, but what scripts do you have running in your head? What scripts do you have about entrepreneurship, about being an entrepreneur, about being self-employed? What do you think when you hear that someone is an entrepreneur? What's that automatic thing? What is the thing that you think your parents will think when you say, I want to become an entrepreneur? Evaluate that, figure out where that came from, and see if that's something that you can change. It's a lot of work, but it's worth it.
Much for sharing that. And that ends our discussion for today. Um, yeah, it's been such a great discussion, and the icing on the cake was soothed. I wish we could do that. We could actually hear that again, guys. You think we should hear it again? Put some emojis in the chat if you want to hear it again, because I think I want to be soothed tonight. So before I go to bed, I want to hear it again in my ears. Um, but yeah, thank you very much for sharing, Maclean. It's been an interesting discussion, and we're hoping to have more of these discussions. For everyone who's joined us, May at No Ordinary Life is Entrepreneurship Month. So every May in every year we will be having discussions like this where we talk about business and startups and just going for things. So oh yeah, someone says yes, they would like to hear it again.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yes, two people, majority wins the vote.
All right. Okay. So I should do it.
Yes, again, again, again.
Okay. Okay. Soothe. Is there a word that can be said to soothe you? A word to make everything okay? Is there a word that will fix you and fix this? The nights are hard, but not as much as the days and their decade-long seconds and centuries-long hours. You must be soothed. Your soul must be lathered with an elixir that heals it. A voice must be spoken and felt that lullabies you to a calm of safety that you no longer know. Your heart must be placed gently in a bowl of chicken soup and left to soak up its every comfort. You must be spoken to with words dipped in cinnamon and honey 10 times over. You must be held for hours on end. You must be acknowledged as real, potently real, and dangerously alive. You must be soothed. You really, really must. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah, that was
Well,
ah I'm gonna make sure I check it out because I yeah, gems.
thank you.
And there's more where that came from. So if you check out the link I put in the chat, you find it. And as I said before, we'll put all the links onto our YouTube channel and our LinkedIn as well for those who want to see more of the creative work by Maclean. So for now, we will love you and leave you. Actually, before you go, we have another event next week. Next week, Wednesday, we have How to Employ Yourself. And that's going to be with a range of young people, young entrepreneurs from Ghana and Malawi. So please join that one. It's next week, Wednesday, at different time zones. 7:30 for Malawi, 6:30 for the UK, 5:30 for Ghana. Yeah, in the evening. So looking forward to seeing you. And thank you very much, everyone. And take care. Have a lovely week. Oh, what something to say?
Yes, just a quick thingy. I'm writing some books. If you, I'd be happy if you followed me on Medium, if you're on Medium. Also, I have a business called Creative Africa Space. So there's some publications I'm working on. I'm working on my memoir and two poetry books. So you might see those and a few other novels. So if you follow me on Medium, you might see that. And if you happen to be on Patreon, I'd be happy to have patrons. So you can find me on Patreon if you are. I don't have a single patron yet, so you'd make my day if someone became one. But yeah, I hope to connect with you guys, especially those who ask questions. I would really love to get to know those of you that we connect with. My main value is empathy, though. So if you're a feeler and you're a fair person, empathetic, I'd really love to get to know you. But yeah, thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Maclean, and thank you everyone for joining. We will get all of those links as well, for Patreon as well, and we'll put them on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, where we're streaming at the moment. So thank you everyone for joining, and I will wish you all a good night. Maclean, you can stay on for a little bit so I can get all the details from you, but I'll say good night to everyone. Good night, everyone. Thank you all.
Good night, guys. Thank you.
Bye.